Hi again, everybody, and welcome to a special back to school edition of Newsmakers TV. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Friday, August 22nd, and as tens of thousands of public school kids return to classes this week, I'm very pleased to welcome back to the program someone who understands the issues surrounding their education better than anybody I know, Santa Barbara County Superintendent of Schools, Susan Salcido. Susan, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with us today. How are you doing?
Oh, thank you so much, Jerry, for the invitation. I'm doing really, really well. We have had 2 weeks of everyday schools opening across Santa Barbara County, and that is the season that I love the most. So I'm doing really well.
Good. Well, my grandkids didn't go back till this week, so it's officially back to school week for me.
For
So
you, yes, yes.
I get to go to the beach in the afternoon sometime. Anyway, Miss Salcido was born and educated in public schools in Santa Maria, earned a BA and a master's degree at UCSB, followed by a PhD from USC, and we won't hold that against her. She worked as a teacher and principal before joining the County Office of Education in 2006. In 2017, she was appointed to complete the final year of the last term of the legendary Superintendent Bill Cerrone, and since has been elected to two four-year terms on her own, most recently in 2022, excuse me. Okay, so I want to get into a lot of stuff about immigration and cuts and DEI and other things, but just to level set, Susan, can you just kind of give us the 20,000 foot view of education in Santa Barbara County? How many students do we have? How many schools and districts and so on?
You bet, you bet. Great, great. Happy to kind of zoom out and give a view of the county. Um, 20 school districts in Santa Barbara County, 10 charter schools, and a number of private schools, of course, and a very, very small group of homeschooled families. 120 schools all across Santa Barbara County. And I think it's important to note that the County Education Office, my organization, and each of those entities are all separate and independent from one another. So when I speak about our districts, each has a superintendent, each has a locally elected school board. We have a school board here. So they're all working interdependently, but independently. So I'll give a report though, we have, I'll talk enrollment for a moment. Excited to, again, as I said, welcome back all the students. I have to tell you, yesterday I was in Santa Maria. I got a honk from a bus driver. I mean, like these are the things that make me so excited. I'm looking at little, youngsters walking off the bus with backpacks bigger than themselves, going on to school and excited about flag football and all of the things that are happening with the energy around schools. And for the
Plus,
long,
it can take your mind off the Dodgers for a moment.
oh my goodness. Well, exactly. We let's not talk about. Actually, they did great last night, but
Couldn't help it.
yes. But I've looked at the enrollment of Santa Barbara County public schools for the last 10 years. And I've been really tracking the enrollment in Santa Barbara County and actually school districts across the county. And for the longest time, for 10 years ago, we'll say, there were about 69,000 students across Santa Barbara County. And then 5 years ago, right at COVID, there was a drop, about 2,000 students, so about 67,000 students across Santa Barbara County. And that number has stayed pretty consistent. We're seeing some increases in some districts. So let me break that down a little bit further. In Santa Maria Valley and the northern part of Santa Barbara County, we're seeing enrollment increases, pretty dramatic enrollment increases. Jerry, their high schools, for example, they have a high school district, Santa Maria Joint Union. Most of their schools are over 3,000 students. And here in the South Coast, you'll see Santa Ynez, for example, that's mid-county, under 1,000 students. Many of the Santa Barbara schools are around that 2,000 plus. So pretty big schools in Santa Maria, increasing enrollment, slightly decreasing in the South Coast. And what we are seeing are impacts of incoming housing developments. So we know that there's a nexus between upcoming housing developments that are going to happen in the South and North County, about 25,000 developments that will impact our entire county, and that will bring enrollment increases to our schools. So,
And when, so I want to get into, drill down a little bit on this issue of absenteeism and chronic
sure.
absenteeism, and also how many kids are, afraid to go to school because of immigration. But do you have a sense of a percentage of enrollment that showed up this week?
I've done some requesting and asking and checking and assessing on the enrollment. And right now, it seems that there were actually higher enrollment in some areas than even anticipated, but that happens. There's a lot of times where school students and families will enroll right the day of school. So there's just been some increases there. Not yet a huge influx of individuals who we expected to come and then didn't come. So that isn't what's being reported right now. But that doesn't mean that it won't exist as the school year goes on.
Yeah, and I just, well, the reason I asked, I read a piece in the LA Times about the superintendent down there saying that I think he said that 93% of kids showed up on the first day, which was good. I
Yeah.
mean, compared to some of the absentees. Is there a comparable number for us?
I don't have the percentage yet, Jerry, across the county, but like I said, there have been reports of enrollment increases actually and higher than even anticipated. I will say that in summer school programs, I had reports of some decreases of attendance. Some individuals who were expected to come to summer school didn't come to summer school. And there are a wide variety of reasons, including vacations and being ill, but there's also the fear and worry as well.
Right. So let's get into that. I mean, it would be nice to talk about literacy and other issues related to what I like to call pedagogy.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, we have to talk about the federal government's effect on public education, which has been extraordinary, radical, right wing, whatever you want to say. I mean, there are a lot of the fever dreams of the right wing swamps that I've followed for many years trying to come true. Let's start with this issue of immigration. I mean, we've had this spectacle of, masked, heavily armed people snatching people off the streets. Where there's had been a federal court order to stop doing it on the basis of people's race, and it's obviously had an impact on because there are so many immigrant families, particularly down here in Santa Barbara Unified, but in other districts throughout the county as well. What is your perspective and assessment on how this deportation assault on Santa Barbara County is affecting kids coming to school, not coming to school?
Yeah, Jerry, I will say that so much of the episodes, experiences, incidents, cases occurred during summer when schools were the traditional school years weren't open. And so during summer, we're observing what we're all observing and really nervous, wondering, anxious about what it could look like for schools. And at the same time, we're really wanting to focus. School people want to focus on children being in our schools every day, feeling great, feeling happy, ready to learn. I mean, Jerry, we really do. It's not a platitude or generalization when we say we want to see students happy and playing and recess and lunch and math and arts and all of this. So that's really we've got to focus on that, but we're focusing on multiple things at one time. So we've spoken around the county about what might it mean? What could it mean to have ICE activities near or around schools? And I've categorized it for me and others. We've talked about it in three categories. Though there are more, I'm sure. One category is ICE on campuses. ICE on campus, what happens there? Another category is ICE around campuses, say a block away, something's happening that's kind of near campuses. And another one is less visible on campus, but rather what happens to the effect, what happens in terms of impacts to families who've been affected by ICE. And so you have unaccompanied minors, you have children coming to school, for example, that may have been separated from a parent or a caregiver or a guardian. And that kind of activity we have seen in Santa Barbara County schools. It's not a what if, but we've seen that. So going to the
I
former,
would imagine downstream mental health issues for kids
that's right.
who are traumatized by this.
That's right. And so we're really thinking about the wraparound supports, we're calling them. How do we ensure that our students are feeling ready to learn when they're on campuses, and providing mental health supports, which we know, by the way, Jerry, that there was a grant that was allocated for 17 counselors for mental health supports in Santa Barbara County, and it got truncated, completely cut off at the knees, and it hasn't been funded. That was a 4-year grant, $7 million, not happening for school counselors for 6 districts. But going back to those categories, I will say that we've been thinking about and planning for and talking with staff about what happens if ICE individuals or Border Patrol come onto campus. And I have to tell you, it's hard for even an aunt or uncle or neighbor to come by and pick up a child who's not on the emergency form. So we've got real strong grasp of safety and who is seeking information at all, or actually seeing or maybe removing a student. So there's a lot of talk about that. And then there's,
But these guys don't play by the rules, Susan.
that's right.
I mean,
Yeah.
they don't care about state law or anything else, or arresting people in court. I mean,
I will say, all of us in schools are for legally implementing school. I mean, we are going to follow the rules. That's what we do in schools. And we ask for the same for anyone that's coming onto campuses. And some of that is out of our control, Jerry, but sometimes we have seen we've seen reports of individuals who are masked, who are not identifying themselves. And if that's a case, I mean, it's just basic strangers on campus, and we're going to call a standard response protocol for that.
yeah, okay. I wanted to get into that bit, and I also, we should emphasize at this point that a point you made earlier, that yours is an administrative agency. You do act on behalf of all local school districts, but each district in and of itself has its own superintendent and a lot of its own protocols. But that said, is there a standard protocol for districts to do what you just said, which is when, masked guys show up on campus?
Well, I will say that there is a standard response protocol that we all have agreed to in Santa Barbara County for any safety matter. And it really was born out of, I'll take a bird walk, but I'll come right back. It really was born 2 years ago. We had the highest number at that time, 2023, the highest number of reported unfortunate school shootings across the United States. And preceding that, 2022, 21, 20, we just saw the numbers increasing. And we at the county office and our school districts and our law enforcement partners said, we all need to do something. Let's be proactive about this. And we landed on common standard response protocol. Should something occur that is just unimaginable. So every Allen Hancock College, SBCC, UC Santa Barbara, all of our public schools, private schools, early care, we all said yes, and so did all of the police chiefs and the sheriff's department. So we can apply that to an individual who comes on campus who may have a weapon, may be masked, who may not be identifying themselves. We would logically apply that same standard response protocol then as well.
So does that mean that a principal in Santa Barbara Unified, for example, is going to call the Santa Barbara Police Department to come arrest federal agents?
In Santa Barbara Unified, had an opportunity to speak with Superintendent Hilda Maldonado, and she was talking about the training she was providing as superintendent to the administrators. And the administrators have been trained. They are going to listen to an individual who comes onto campus just as you would anyone else. What are you here for? What do you need? How can I help you? That's how we respond. And only if there is a legal reason for an individual to be there, then we would support. If there isn't, then we're going to say there's a stranger on campus.
And then just to back up to this task force that you mentioned, and you were much too modest in not talking about the key role that you played in pulling that all together. Law enforcement was a big important part of that. So have you had recent communications with the sheriff and the police chiefs and so on about, hey, if these federal thugs come on campus, you got to come arrest them? I mean,
I have
I'm
spoken.
simplifying, obviously, but you know what I'm
Right.
saying.
Yeah, it's hard for me to say it precisely. I mean, I have spoken to Sheriff Brown. I've spoken to law enforcement officials from Santa Barbara County, different police organizations who are all in support of supporting us in schools. I mean, when there's an emergency, they want to support. What's tricky and what I was saying just a moment ago is it's hard for me to even articulate the differences in the roles of law enforcement, multiple different law enforcement personnel, border patrol, ICE. I mean, it gets a little convoluted there. It seems like what we would do, what I would advise any of our schools to do is if there is not only a conflict on campus, but a crisis on campus, a stranger, a big event that's very scary. I mean, that's what we do. We call law enforcement partners to say we need support. So I would say there's no resist. Why would we resist that and do that? We do want to. Anyone who comes into campuses, that's what we do in schools. How can I help you? What do you need? What is it that you need? But if they're not responding, or if they're providing something that's a warrant that's not official, that's not for us to handle. That is something that we would call law enforcement to help. We would say, you're not welcome here. Because what our focus is, Jerry, is it's educating the students, protecting our students, blocking from distractions, and our staff as well.
Yeah, but it's scary. I mean, what you've just described, the scenario you just described. I mean, okay, so Miss O'Brien in the school office sees these guys come in,
Right.
and she's got to make a real-time judgment call. Are they legitimate? Is this a legal warrant? Do they have any warrant? Are they identified? I mean, there's all kinds of things. Are support staff throughout the county trained to make those kinds of judgments?
I would anticipate if you and I were in a school office and that happened, it could be jarring. I'm assuming it could be very frightening for some. What we've advised is to have a point person, an administrator or a point person that we can say to an office team, I need you to have a seat. Have a seat. You need to wait, and they're going to call on this administrator to be their support, a point person, so that it's not a scramble. I don't know what to do, but rather here's what I know I need to do. So that's really the advice is to have a point person on campus, should there be the need, and that point person will then address that individual or the individuals because.
Right.
Yeah, there are so many employees throughout Santa Barbara County. They're not all going to have the training to, for example, somebody who's somebody who's in the back office or somebody who might be in a classroom supporting. We want to make sure that each school has a point person.
All right. And just to close on this, because we got to get to those other two situations. So when you talk about the task force that was formed in 2023 to specifically deal with the crisis issues at school, is it accurate to say that it has the guidelines and protocols and guidance that was put in place then has been updated to accommodate the recent events in and surrounding
Yeah,
deportation?
Yeah, the standard response protocol are meant to be cross-cutting to any emergency that's happening near or around schools. So I'm really, really glad about that. In fact, we actually worked with law enforcement personnel here in Santa Barbara County to say, let's work on what does it mean to secure a school? What does it mean to hold a school? What does it mean to lock down a school? Unfortunately, we have to have that language, but we have the language, which is good because, as you know, you could have a child who attends Peabody School, a child who attends Adelante School, and a child who goes to City College, and you want to be all speaking the same
So
language.
there is a common protocol throughout.
There's a common protocol that really is meant to be cross-cutting across these emergencies. We, in 2023, also invested in a school safety liaison. He was formerly with the sheriff's deputy and a sheriff's deputy, and now is working for the county education office, working with schools on their school safety plans, and being of support so that he could toggle both worlds, the law enforcement world and school worlds. We all have different language and abbreviations and all. So he really helps to bridge those organizations. And then we have yearly and annual trainings for law enforcement and school personnel countywide, so that we're always focusing on those standard response protocols.
All right, and then let's talk quickly about the other two categories that you mentioned. One
Right,
is there's an event happening
right.
in around the school. First of all, and then we'll talk about what's happened with the students who have.
Yeah, yeah. There have been reports, sometimes they're accurate and sometimes they're not. We know that there's just calls that are made and say that there's something happening. And we want to know the facts because our communities want to know the facts. What's happening around the corner? Why can't I pick up my child? For example, it's a blocked road. That has happened in the past, not related to ICE. And what the school principals are always expected to know is what's happening near or around my campuses. And now, should there be ICE personnel around our campuses, it will create a popcorn effect of emotions. So in that case, we'll want to know what's happening. We do want to connect with our law enforcement, police, and sheriff's departments to say what's happening, give us the facts so that we can then know. I think that's really, really important. We won't be able to control what's happening around or near our campuses, but we need to know what exactly is happening. We do know, Jerry, I was just in Lompoc Unified last night. They were having a town hall. They were talking about walking carpools so that families can walk to school together, so that should something happen nearby, they really feel secure together. So that's something that families are doing. But then there's the other piece that is, I think, we're seeing that happening already, which is the unaccompanied minors, those who've been separated from their caregivers, grandparents, or parents. And that becomes another challenge because we are, of course, providing the education for the students, but the students are coming not thinking about math and reading and science and art and playing. They're thinking about, when am I going to see my family again?
Yeah. So what are there protocols in place for that? Is there a commonality across the county school systems to deal with that, or what's the approach?
I think that I will say the common approach is around the caring for the students and ensuring that they have the supports needed. How each district does that is different. It depends on the staffing available, the size of the school, depends on, so there's a lot of factors there. But there is such a concerted effort on the social, emotional well-being of students. There's usually a team of individuals that will wrap around supports for students. And it's not all about school either. It's really around checking in, what kinds of supports are available for the family at home, what kind of resources. So there's a lot of connecting and navigating to families. But that is one of the hardest components when you see a student coming to school. I've had accounts of this, Jerry, from firsthand people who are saying, the first graders in my office crying and worried. So that fear and the worry and the anxiety that we are hearing about in schools as well.
And then just one more quick question on this. So I'm a sixth grader at Adelante School, and I've just seen my dad or my uncle or my grandma or somebody snatched or whatever. He's like, I'm not going out of the house. I'm not going to school. Are there accommodations to be made for students, throughout the county for online school who don't, who literally are too afraid to come to school?
Yeah, there is independent study that's available for every school. It I I cannot say for certain that we have policy in all of our schools to say, due to this reason, we're going to provide independent studies yet. I'm seeing reports of that in different districts in California. But in terms of being, what we want to do is have our students actually in our classrooms at schools every day. That's really the aim and focus. We know that that's better for most students because they're seeing their friends, they're seeing their teachers, they're surrounded by adults who care. But independent studies does exist, and that does get utilized for families as it is. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some of that occurring here in Santa Barbara County, but it isn't something that's a policy yet.
Okay, all right. And oh yeah, just to relate it, there was this letter sent to Sheriff Brown a couple weeks ago. I think Salute Carbajal kind of led off, but there were, I don't know, a couple dozen elected officials asking him to use his position, his national platform as head of the Sheriff's Association to get some pushback on these three. Were you a signatory to that letter?
I was not a signatory to that letter.
Okay. Um, I want to talk about the second big piece of the sort of Trump effect on public education, and that's financial, fiscal issues. Of course, we read about the dismantling of the Department of Education, the federal Department of Education, which I think a lot of people misunderstand what it does and doesn't do, but it does have some fiscal implications, I think, for local education. What's the overall importance of that from your perspective on federal money coming to local education?
Yeah, the federal Department of Education and its impacts on public schools are vast. And I will say there's federal funding. There is federal funding that was allocated and then taken back, or never allocated, I should say, but stated that it was coming and then taken back. And then there's what all of this means for us in literally here in Santa Barbara County. So when I talk about federal funds, we all heard about the impounds. There were going to be impounded funds. They were very specific dollars. We heard it was about $1 billion in California. In Santa Barbara County, those impounded funds totaled $12.4 million for our school districts. So
12.4.
12.4 million for school districts. And those were very categorized dollars for professional learning, migrant education, after school. So that was what that news was about. And we heard July 1st that they were going to be impounded. Even with the term impounded, we were wondering, does that mean we'll receive it, not receive it? What's happening with it? It was just not a lot of definition. But we did hear a couple of weeks ago that those were unfrozen and will be allocated back to school districts. So there's that kind of funding situation that's occurred. One tier.
So the checks in the mail.
Checks in the mail. They'll go to the states. The funding will go to the state, and the states will then allocate it back to the districts. Other kinds of funds that were not related to the impounds, but are grant related, is what I said a few moments ago. An example was mental health dollars that were granted to 6 school districts in Santa Barbara County for 17 mental health counselors. And it was, you got the grant, now you don't have the grant. So that is happening as well. What I will say is related to that is it's the it's the promised funds that aren't granted. It's the scramble that happens when you're planning for, say, 3 years forward, hiring staff to do the work, knowing what you need to do strategically, and then you have to pivot because you're not getting that funding anymore. That's the kind of scramble that's really challenging for any entity, schools and others, who need to plan not just a month at a time, but really years at a time to support students and their learning for years. So when you have those plans in place, but then things pivot dramatically and quickly all over the place, that becomes a scramble, and that's a challenge. But I will say what all of this means, what it can mean. Some of those dollars are, let me just say, Federal Department of Education. One of their tasks, one at their core, is to support students with disabilities. So Individuals with Disabilities Acts protects students with special needs. In Santa Barbara County, we have 12% of students in public schools are supported through special education. So if the Department of Education changes its commitment to students with disabilities, the Individuals with Disabilities Act, which, by the way, this is the 50th anniversary this year of IDEA, that would make a difference for Santa Barbara County families. Another change, a shift that we are starting to see, and this
So is that happening?
it could happen, because with the Department of Education reducing its staff, which we know that is happening, how are they going to be focusing on supporting the rights of students with individuals with disabilities? So it's a question, but
So it's a downstream effect.
Downstream
What's
effect.
happening in Washington.
That's right. Another one is students who, schools that are supporting students with low income, poverty, low socioeconomically disadvantaged families. And Jerry, you can read many reports about Santa Barbara County, but a recent report, actually Communify did a report and presented it in January, showing that Santa Barbara County is of all 58 counties in California, second highest in terms of rates of poverty. So you have a family of four making $27,000. That's how they were quantifying that family income. And we've got about 42% of the households in Santa Barbara County at that rate. We have a very high percentage of individuals with low income in Santa Barbara County. One of the core vision statements of the Federal Department of Education is supporting students and schools with low income. So if that changes, that will significantly shift what we'll see in terms of supports for our families in Santa Barbara County.
Well, and obviously we have, very high percentages of so-called minority students in our enrollments, and that's another thing. The whole, the whole civil rights, DEI, whatever you want to call it, approach to things has just been completely turned on its head, so that now life has been so unfair for poor and sensitive new age white guys like myself, and all of the people who have been I think properly protected under the law for a long time, are now being seen as the oppressors or something. I don't know. What about this whole attack on DEI, on civil rights, which is what I would call it? How is that affecting us?
Yeah, first of all, let me go back to what you said in terms of the ethnicity and makeup of our schools demographic. 70% of students in Santa Barbara County, 70% in our public schools are Latino, 20% are white, and the remaining 10% have significantly important individuals and backgrounds, but they're much smaller percentages. And I shared with you before, the 12% who receive special education supports. I mean, we can go on and splice the demographics. Back to your question around
We haven't even talked about non-English or English learners.
English learners, a
Other
very high
issues.
percentage, exactly. Individuals, students who identify as LGBTQ plus. So we've got lots of diversity within our schools and our staff as well. So when we talk back going to DEI, which is what you were bringing forward, it's something happened, Jerry, in our history that it seems like DEI has been placed somewhere here, and you're either for it or against it, and it seems like that's the just putting that a binary problem just doesn't seem to make sense to me. I think we need to shift that and put it over here, over there, and really talk about, what are our principles in the world as individuals? What are we believe in, and who are we supporting? And I would say that I really can't think of any person. I mean, maybe there's some outliers here, but I think we can all rally around supporting our youth, supporting our children, and saying to them, as any parent or caregiver or aunt or uncle or friend would do, is saying to the children, what is it that you need to succeed? What can I give you? What do you need? How can I help you? That's what we do for our youth. And so when we're looking at our youth, and we have so many who are from, low income backgrounds, we have many who are multilingual and emerging as English learners, so many from all kinds of diversity, how is it that we're saying we're either for that or against that? I just don't see that. That just doesn't make any common sense. So an example of inclusion, people use that and say inclusion, I'm for it or I'm against it. Just a moment ago, I was talking about the 50th anniversary of the Special Education, IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Act. Before that, 50 years ago, students with significant disabilities weren't supported in schools. They went to a different place, and now they are all guaranteed free and public education, what they call a least restrictive environment, meaning be with amongst your peers and have equity in schools and be included. I can't see how somebody would say that's a bad idea. We should not include people. So this DEI pulling it back and saying you're either for it or against it, I just think that's been politicized, and it really polarizes people to where we need to put that aside and talk really about our principles and supporting the diversity within our communities. Absolutely do want equity and inclusion. And Jerry, I will say something that you said a moment ago. I think people, I want to recognize, I think people have felt blamed. I think they have felt blamed and thinking, people are telling me it's my fault. That shouldn't happen either. I mean, we really need to be thinking about our youth, supporting every individual, exactly who they are, all the identities that they have, wrapping our arms around them and saying, you are our future. We need to support you. That is what makes common sense.
Yeah. Well, I will spare you one of my rants about the current political situation, but I mean, you do point to the central problem, which is everything in our society has now become tribalized. And are you wearing a red jersey or are you wearing a blue jersey? And so this whole notion of common sense increasingly is being lost. I mean, would you have thought 10 years ago that we would have had are you someone who's against vaccines as the head of the HHS, which incidentally, I imagine is another practical problem that you see in dealing with districts of kids coming to school who are unvaccinated or people refusing to and threatening herd immunity.
Mhm. You know what, Jerry? I will say there's a fine line between, maybe there's a fine line between positivity and optimism and Pollyanna. I
There's
do
not
not.
such a fine line around here, Susan.
I
You're
will
the only
say,
optimistic person here. Okay, I'll
I really,
stipulate to that.
I want to acknowledge that I don't want to subscribe to Pollyanna and head in the sand, but I do want to subscribe to optimism, positivity, hope, and really believing that there is common ground still. And I know that it can feel like we're all just on one side or the other, and you're either with me or you're against me. And we just can't have that in our public schools. We have to be on common ground, focusing on every individual. And yes, I see what you're saying, and I understand that what you're saying does exist, but we have to really put our energy towards that common ground for all students. And diversity and equity and inclusion, it somehow turned into DEI, bad, good. No, diversity, equity, inclusion is what we do and have done in public schools since the beginning of time. And as I said before, and you said too, common sense. Let's use the common sense and common ground. That's what we need as we go forward, because there's so much happening. We would never have predicted where we are today, but now is when we need everyone to come together. And now is when we need to support our schools and in absolutely teaching our children. We need to have the joyful learning. You know, when you drive by or walk by a school at recess, you want to hear the playing and the laughing. That's what we need. We need to protect our children from all of this by having that common ground.
Yeah, well, that's a good place to leave it. Susan, I have so much respect for you and what you do, and just more broadly, that's one of the things that drives me the craziest is the demonization of people who are in public service or public employment or whatever you want to call it, because 95. I've been doing this for 50 years, and 95% of the people I met who do that kind of work are doing it for all the right reasons and for the aforementioned values, which we seem to be losing sight of. But you're in there fighting the good fight every day, and I applaud you for it. And on behalf of everyone, I thank you for all the work you do. And good luck with this school year. I hope I don't have to call you back for another emergency session.
Call me back anytime, Jerry. Thank you so much for the invitation. Appreciate you.
Thank you very much. Susan Salcido, Santa Barbara County Superintendent of Schools. Take care.
Thank you.